So last 15 minutes, I will be engaged in some kind of conversation with you all, so that it had been a long soliloquy on my part. So I will invite questions from you, if you can.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your enlightening speech. Your in depth knowledge of this area will be very helpful for us and enrich our students also. We have enjoyed throughout the lecture, and I hope our students have also enjoyed. So, you have made a difficult subject very lucid and easier. So, with your permission, I would like to invite some questions from our students.
Yes, please.
Any question from the students?
Please feel free. We are discussing poetry. We are just celebrating poetry. This is 100 years of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, the most influential poet critic of the 20th century. Yes, Shayoni, please.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm a student of UG 5th SEM, and thank you so much for explaining such a difficult topic in such a easier manner. Sir, I had a question that we know we have already read Wordsworth a bit, and as we know that Wordsworth tried to change the trends and traditions of his previous era, and tried to um, he tried to include feelings and emotions in his poem. And as we know that Wordsworth first first stated that poetry should be the emotions and the um, should be the emotion and the expressions of poets' feelings. But as you said that Eliot said that poetry is an escape from emotion. So how can I relate these two contradictory thoughts according to the modernist viewpoint? Because as we know that in present day there are many more mode of poetry such as autobiographical poetry, and there are many more such as it includes autobiography and then the expression of feelings. So, how can I relate these two contradictory thoughts or theories according to the modernist traditions?
Thank you, Shayoni. The observation and the question both are interesting. You have drawn our attention to the romantic rejection of the neoclassical concept of poetry. This is one part. So Wordsworth in the preface says that the inane phraseology of the neoclassical master will be rejected by me, and I will be writing on incidents and situations of the common life. So on the formal level, he said that neoclassical poetic form will be rejected by me. On the contextual level, the aristocratic life of the urban poets of neoclassical age will be rejected by me. And then he came to the observation that my poetry will be spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. It will be more personal. I will be choosing incident situation from common life. I will be using language really used by men and present that as far as practicable, so that human beings can understand the poetry. So you said that in this concept of poetry, there is enough scope for autobiography, while T.S.
Yes,
Eliot
sir.
says that there is no scope for autobiography in objective
For
poetry.
emotions.
There is
Yes,
no
sir.
scope. That means poetry cannot be autobiographical according to T.S. Eliot.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
poetry cannot be autobiographical. Even if the poetry is autobiographical, the persona who is speaking poetry should not be the poet.
Should not be the point.
Should
Yes,
not
sir.
be the poet. So I can be in Gerontian or the Hollow Man. I can invent a persona who can resemble me, but that persona will be independent. It will not be autobiographical. Autobiographical poetry is bad poetry. So Wordsworth said that the sonnets of Shakespeare are autobiographical, and
See,
T.S. Eliot
this
says that
in anyhow related to the readers or us, because as we read a poetry or a prose, we always try to relate it to ourselves. But here, as the theory, as according to the theory of Eliot, the poetry and the poet are the poetry persona and the poet are two separate person. But is it also applicable for the readers or only to the poet?
yeah, T.S. Eliot's theory is referring to the poet. Okay,
Only to the
every reader will appreciate the poem critically. Honest criticism, he's talking about honest criticism, will
Yes,
not
sir.
take into account the poet, rather take into account only the poetic work. So as a reader should also look at the poem as objectively as possible without taking into account the biography of the writer. There is no scope of bioliterary criticism as far as the understanding of poem is concerned.
Yes, sir. Understood. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so Wordsworth also said that it is also a recollection. Poetry is also a recollection in tranquility. So Wordsworth is not writing autobiography. Coleridge is also not writing autobiographical poems. But their poems appear to be autobiography as if to connect with the readers. It is not the
Yes, sir.
personality of Wordsworth that we understand in his poems. Rather, it is the personality of the narrator who is there. However, there are exceptions. Say Tinton Abbey, where we read a lot of autobiography of
Yes,
William Wordsworth. So Eliot is not encouraging that type of poetry that we find in Tinton Abbey or
yes, sir.
Immortality Ode. Thank you for asking this question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
So you are all well read. So I face this challenge again. Thank you, teachers, for preparing the students so well.
Thank you, Shayoni.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So,
Hello.
next question.
Shagota, can I ask a question?
Yes,
Actually,
yes.
it's not a question, it's a
Let me
suggestion, might be.
introduce you. Let me introduce you, sir. She is Ishita Banerjee. She is one of the faculty, Department of English, Sharodama Girls College.
Yes, Professor
So-
Ishita Banerjee, yes.
So, first of all, a very warm welcome to our college and this webinar. I just have one small suggestion that can we relate in this way that Eliot's objectivity, can it anticipate in any way the death of the author theory? I mean, when we are not taking the author into consideration while we are reading any piece of literature, so can it anticipate in any way the death of the author?
So the post-structuralist view, death of the author, should not
Can
be
it be
related.
related?
Yeah, it can be related, but that will be far-fetched one. Just for the
Okay.
reason, that will be far-fetched one, just for one reason. Because Eliot is not talking about the death of the author in the metaphysical sense. He is talking of the death of the author in the creative, poetic creative sense. He is not
Okay,
talking
so-
about the death of the author. He is talking about the intellectual involvement of the author and
So,
separation
yes.
of the artist from the work of art.
So the moment we are talking about the influence of the author and the authorial intrusion time and again in a text, in a work of art, so that is in a way impeding our way of understanding the text properly. So that might be in a way objective concern that Eliot wanted to introduce in his theory.
Yes, the entire formalism, English formalism, new criticism, talks about this non-involvement of the poet in the artistic creation.
Yes.
That is one part, but that
Yes.
does not talk about the death of the author. Okay, it is the presence of the author as a craftsman. Yes,
Yes.
as an
Yes.
artist.
So it's a differentiation between the poetic persona and the speaker. Yes. Yes.
Do not trust
Okay.
the artist. Okay,
Yes.
do not
Yes.
trust
Yes.
the artist. Trust the work. That is what the formalists are talking about. Look
Yes.
at the bubble. Do not try to understand who this bubble blower is. Just analyze
Yes.
this text separated from the author.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you.
So if you want to murder the author, there is no problem. जो बोलने
Okay.
वाला author को author शोर करता है, the sound and silence, the author should be silenced in the analysis of the text. That is what T.S. Eliot is saying. And you can
Yes.
say that this is a common ground. Definitely,
Yes.
this is a common ground. The death of the author should be there for appreciating the text and for writing the text.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ishita Di, for the beautiful question. Next question, any from the students? Yes,
Ma'am,
Pap-
can I ask?
Yes, yes, sure.
Sir, you said that J. Alfred Prufrock is an artificial poem, but as we know that it is depicting the crude reality of modern society, then I mean, how Eliot is blending artificial and reality in this poem or in his overall poetry?
Thank you, Suchayata, for this emotional question. The question is emotional.
Sir, I'm
Okay.
So
Papri.
this is Papri.
Okay. The question is partly emotional because you're confusing means something natural and something artificial. By artificial, I mean that it is not like a leaf growing out of a tree. Okay, poetry is not a leaf growing out of a tree. Okay, there is some essential difference between something that is natural and something that is artificial. Poet is an artist, and whatever poet does is artistic. Okay, from this word art, the word artificial has come. So anything artistic is artificial. Artificial is
Okay.
something that is man-made. Okay, I use the word artificial in that sense. And definitely
Okay, sir.
what you said is correct. Yes, he is representing the realities of life, holding a mirror to life. Instead of illuminating the mind of the poet visible to us, he is trying to objectify the realities of life and present that in its crude form as it is. The slice of life reality is presented through his work. But the representation and the actual, okay, there is a C gap, there is a large gap. So when you are transmuting the thought into language, you are also working in an artificial way, using artificial language in order to create poetry. And poetry is the best, okay, best artifice ever created by human
Okay.
beings. It is the most artificial form. Like theater is thrice removed from reality because of its artifice. It has to be representing things in a form of imitation, copying the story and presenting the story in an imitative form. Like that, poetry is also imitation in an artificial form with the help of language, rhythm, okay, rhyme, thought,
Okay, sir.
representation of society. So our observations, Papri, these are not self-contradictory. Okay, what you said is correct. What I say is also correct.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for raising this question. It's often a
Thank you,
question.
Bapu.
We often say that even when the poetry is subjective or autobiographical, the poetry is artificial. Even if someone is writing his own life or her own life, like the poetry of Sylvia Plath, how will you read the poems of Sylvia Plath or Kamala Das? So you will say that Kamala Das writes autobiographical poetry. Had she done so, lesser artist is she. Kamala Das never writes autobiography. Sylvia Plath never writes autobiography. She writes poetry. So there is an essential difference between Lazarus, Lady Lazarus, and Sylvia Plath. So Lady Lazarus is a character in Sylvia Plath's poem, Lady Lazarus. Or Daddy, there is a persona. She's not Sylvia Plath. She's not writing autobiography. She's not writing natural poems. Rather, she is also artificially, advertorially writing poems. Her poems are advertorials. Very conscious use of language, sound, rhythm. Objectivity is there in the poems, even though the poets appear to be very confessional. Okay, even when you want to confess, you have to use language. And the best confessions are those that are most artificial.
Okay, sir.
Sylvia Plath is the most artificial poets of English literature. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Any other question,
Thank you.
observation?
Thank you,
Good
Bapu.
afternoon.
Yes, Gargi.
Hello, sir. My name is Gargi Chakraborty. I am PG SEM 3 student, and firstly, I would like to thank you. And we are really privileged to have you today. So, I have two questions. The first is, as our topic is modernism and T.S. Eliot. So, I would like to ask you, how does modernism relate to T.S. Eliot according to you? Because modernism, the word itself, is different to different people from us. So, what is your perspective of the word modernism, and how does modernism relate to T.S. Eliot? And my second question is, T.S. Eliot states that poetry is not a turning loose of emotion but an escape from emotion. Can you just please explain, sir?
Thank you. First question must be responded first. But in responding to the first question, I will not be turning loose my emotion. Okay, I will try to escape from it. So I will not say what I think about T.S. Eliot's modernity. I will talk about the concept of modernity that T.S. Eliot is talking about very objectively. Eliot's modernism is objectivity, representing the reality in its harsh, crude manner in the most objective way with psychological verisimilitude in the structures that have developed that may be fragmented or having broken syntax, representing life in a modern metropolitan manner. This is T.S. Eliot's concept of modernity. So he's responding to the metropolitan culture, the literary as well as the socio-economic culture in an artistic manner by retaining strict objectivity without any kind of ideological outpourings of his personal emotion. The second question is that related to T.S. Eliot's concept of poetry as an intellectual act. So if the horse makes friendship with the grass, will the horse eat the grass? So answer will be no. घोड़ा अगर घास से दोस्ती कर ले तो घोड़ा घास क्या खाएगा? घोड़ा घास नहीं खाएगा। ঘোড়া যদি ঘাসের সাথে বন্ধুত্ব করে না, ঘোড়া কি ঘাস খাবে? পোয়েট যদি পোয়েট্রির সাথে বন্ধুত্ব করে না, সে কি কবিতা লিখবে নাকি কাঁদবে? That is what T.S. Eliot is trying to say. If the poet falls in love with his own poetry and writes his own autobiographical, emotional outpouring poetry, at best it can become a very good emotional love letter addressed to the self or to a beloved. It can never become poetry. So a poet has to keep control of the emotion. There should not be a structural, spontaneous overflow of emotion. Whatever comes to my mind, I will just write, outpour it. Rather, T.S. Eliot is talking about his controlled emotion. Even when Prufrock, see in J. Alfred Prufrock, even when Prufrock is totally disillusioned and thinks that no girl, beautiful girl, the lady of the city, will accept his proposal, he is not crying aloud. He writes, I grow old, I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. I grow old, I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. So had he turned loose his emotion, what would he say? No one is accepting his proposal. He is already 40 plus. Not very rich, just a clerk working in that, where the women who are elitist, who will admire the paintings of Michelangelo, they will not look at this thin, aging old bachelor. They will not accept his love. So he's trying to maintain his body physical form. And when he realizes that he is also growing old, he's presenting that structure of emotion in a very objective manner without turning loose emotion. So Eliot was passing through a very bad state of mind where his own girlfriends or beloved, they have rejected, or friends have left him. But he says that poetry is not turning loose of emotion. If the poet simply start loving their poems or start loving themselves subjectively, start leaping up their hearts at the sight of the rainbow, the heart will leapfrog, jump outside and become disintegrated. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. Can the heart leap up? Try out like a frog. If the heart leaps out, what will happen? That will be the spontaneous overflow of turning loose of emotion. And when the heart leaps up, it comes out, it will get scattered. What is the meaning of the line? The child is the father of man. So for T.S. Eliot, these are rubbish. And then T.S. Eliot will be saying that I have measured my life with coffee spoons. I have measured my life with coffee spoons. Is it turning loose of emotion? So it is an escape from it. So your emotions are your emotions. Poets' emotions are poets' emotions that are well kept in the diaries. Do not write poetry that resemble your diary notes. That is what T.S. Eliot is saying. So in order to escape your personal emotion, you have to be artistic. So it is not the Pygmalion. You remember Pygmalion, the artist is making the sculpture and finally falls in love with the sculpture he has made. So poetry is not that love affair between the poet and the work of poetry. It is not turning loose of emotion. Poetry is not the beloved of the poet. Rather, poetry is totally separate. Separate and artistic creativity to be sold in the market, in the consumer world. Thank you, Gargi, for raising this question.
Thank you, sir.
Any more question, Suchata?
Sir, I have a question, sir. How does Eliot become the voice reflecting the anxieties of modernism?
Anxieties of modernity.
Modernism.
So sitting in 21st century, are we not modern? Every age calls itself modern. Okay, the dress we wear, the culture we imbibe, whatever is modern. Okay, whatever was past. Eliot's concept of modernism is similarly whatever was modern during his life, all the cultural conditions, especially the metropolitan culture. Europe has become the center of imperialism, and very soon the First World War will start. First World War happens. 1922, he writes The Wasteland. So T.S. Eliot's modernism is relating to the contemporary realities of the post-First World War generation. The cultural preferences of the age, the collapse of old values, the emergence of new structures. Was that your question, Sucheta?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question.
Thank you, sir.
Any more question?
Ma'am, can I ask?
Yes, Disha.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir. First of all, I would like to thank you for this precious speech. It helped us a lot. Sir, my question is, as we know, the structure of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock is fragmented itself, where he uses the scattered, broken pieces that eliminate the traditional liner flow of a poem. How can we relate this with the new age poetry, modern poetry?
Thank you, Disha, for drawing our attention to the interrelationship between form and content. Modernity is fragmented. It's not structured. Virginia Woolf talks about this in her famous essay, Modern Fiction, that life is not a series of giglams symmetrically arranged. So it is like a semi-transparent luminous halo that envelopes us from the beginning to the end. So everything is not chronological. Everything is not structured in the modern life. This fragmentation of life is represented through the fragmentation of the structure in Eliot's poem, J. Alfred Prufrock, where we have broken syntax, we have the use of consciousness as a very ambiguous polyphonic voice, we have the inner monologues, inner voices, and the language is not satiated. The language has centripetal and centrifugal forces. The voices that are emerging through the poem, these are not allowed in this poem to fuse together, blend together. And this is a modernist tendency among the poets. T.S. Eliot combines the impact of symbolism, surrealism together in his poems. And therefore, we have the picture of the fragmentation of the consciousness as well as fragmentation of the metropolitan city life, where we have alienation, where we have ennui, where we have a sense of despair, metaphysical anguish of being uprooted from the world, a sense of non-belongingness to the world, a sense of cluttering our lives in closed, claustrophobic cocoons. This type of consciousness can be best represented through a form of poetry that will capture such voices. So there are some kind of slips, some kind of flashback narratives with flash forward narratives, and we have slides moving in a series. We also have a series of images that cannot be correlated together. And yet within the urban land, when the narrator is moving through the street, it is very possible that such images will capture the sounds and sensation of the urban life, of the metropolitan life. Therefore, here in T.S. Eliot, the form and content both are blended together in order to represent the fragmentation of the modern life, of modern civilization.
Understood, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Disha, for raising this question related to the content as well as form.
Any more question?
Good afternoon, sir. I have a question. How can we incorporate T.S. Eliot's theory of poetry in this particular poems, as you explained, Preludes and the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock? Please explain in a nutshell I will be obliged after hearing your explanation. In a nutshell.
Thank you, Shuhana. So this can be a footnote to what my discussion was. A question that is more relevant to you all. How Eliot's theory of poetry is related to these two poems, Prelude and J. Alfred Prufrock. So objective correlative, a set of situation, objects are set, dramatic situation, where the characters are placed, thereby generating a type of emotion. And that emotion is allowing the persona to emerge as an individual placed in a typical situation, becoming a typical persona, responding to the same situation, thereby maintaining strict dramaticity, objective correlative. It is there. The voices that are there in J. Alfred Prufrock, these are all captured in quotations. And therefore, there are inner referentiality within the poet, inner textuality. Say, for example, in one section, he is saying, I'm not Prince Hamlet, so I'm an attendant lord. In some section, he is trying to talk about the person who is totally mesmerized by the beauty of the beloved. And he is saying that what the beloved will think about this. And one at a time, pressing her pillow under her head, would say, no, this is not what I meant at all. This is not what I meant at all. So the voices that are occurring in the mind, these are all objectively presented. And therefore, the theory of objectivity is there. With this theory of objectivity, we have the impersonal theory of poetry that is also there in the preludes. Impersonal theory of poetry will not locate the artist in the work of art. There will be no kind of literary imprint of the personal life of the artist in the work of art. In prelude, we do not have the presence of the artist, the poet, even in the chamber of the prostitute or even in the urban world. The poem also ends with that image of the infinitely suffering woman that has the entire world wrapping together. The storm that blows through the street is not experienced by the poet because the poet has remained outside the work, translating that image with the help of imagery, with the help of symbology, myth, and rituals, trying to represent things as objectively, as universal, as metaphorical. So whenever you create a metaphor, a trope in poetry, and allow that trope to function in a structure, you have that mind of the poet working as a platinum, shade of platinum, without undergoing any kind of change, because it is not turning loose of emotion, rather an escape from it. Finally, there is a unified sensibility in the poems that you have mentioned. Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock and Prelude. Unified sensibility talks about the union of intellect with feelings, thought with emotion. So I think I don't have to explain this, because in this poem, the thought as well as feeling, emotion and intellect, all these are blended together. That found a kind of dissociation of sensibility, according to T.S. Eliot, in the works of William Wordsworth, Romantic poets, or in the works of Alexander Pope. According to Eliot, Alexander Pope was an intellectual writer who only thought, used his intellect. On the other hand, Wordsworth was an emotional writer who only felt and presented emotional, spontaneous poems. So in Preludes and Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, there is a blending like the metaphysical poets, John Donne and Andrew Marvell, using the metaphors and concepts in order to represent the thought and emotion of a character that has been independently developed, or the voices that
Okay,
are
sir.
independently developed.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you very much, Shuhana.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions?
I have a question.
Anurikta. Okay.
Sir, there is a phrase that modernism is a map and postmodernism is a collage. Then how T.S. Eliot agree with that phrase?
Please repeat. Just for audio disturbance, I could not hear. Please repeat, Anukrita. Anurikta.
Sir, yes. There is a phrase that modernism is a map and postmodernism is a collage. Then how T.S. Eliot agree with that phrase with his poetries?
So is it the full stop after the sentence? Do you draw a full stop to the criticism? If you are drawing a full
Yes,
stop,
sir.
if you are drawing
Yes,
a full stop, you are a modernist. Okay, if you are drawing a full stop, you are a modernist. If you are not drawing a full stop, you are a postmodernist. That means you talk about open-ended. A map usually is fragmented into parts. Okay. A map is usually fragmented into parts, but it has a coherence as a whole. Okay, on the other hand, a collage is pasting of the parts in order to create a whole. So from the fragments you create a whole, and from the whole you create fragments. According to the definition, that is the essential difference between modernism and postmodernism. Although I do not agree with this close cut definition of modernism and postmodernism, I can say that T.S. Eliot belongs to neither. Okay, he does not belong to the mapping, he does not belong to the montaging. Rather he belongs, or collaging, rather he belongs to a space in between the two. Okay, in between the two, as the definition he gives of tradition and individual talent. If tradition is the map having so many fragments inside, individual talent is the joining of the fragments drawn from different areas. And T.S. Eliot belongs to the hinterland between map and collage or montage. So he belongs to a space between modernism and postmodernism.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Because he is bringing in the fragments, especially the wasteland, where we have different stories together, fragmentary stories brought together as in a montage, and then we have the main story, the wasteland. It's a meta-narrative, the story of the post-war world. It's a meta-narrative, the history. And he is bringing that map and showing the components of the map together. Therefore, we can say that he belongs to the middle ground between this modernist definition of modernism as a map and postmodernist definition of postmodernism as a collage.
Thank you, Anurita, for raising this question. Thank you, sir. So I hope there is no more question. And with the permission of Madam and Sir, then I would like to move towards the valedictory session. Good afternoon, everyone present here. Honorable Chief Guest, Sir Dr. Shubhabrata Sarkar, Associate Professor, Department of English, Rishi Bankim Chowdhury, respected convener, Madam Professor Mahua Bhattacharjee, and all the participants, our loving students. It is such an honor for me to get the opportunity to thank you all the dignitaries on behalf of the English Department, RKVM Sharadama Girls College. I would like to express my gratitude to the esteemed delegate of this webinar, sir, for your gracious presence and contribution. It make this webinar a grand success, and I extend my heartfelt gratitude for taking out time from your busy schedule to grace this event. Thank you for encouraging us with your words on this special day. A special thanks to Madam Professor Mahua Bhattacharjee, Teacher in Charge and Head of Department of English, RKVM Sharadama Girls College, for providing us immense support to make this webinar successful. I would like to thank our governing body and my gratitude to the organizing committee and Professor Ishita Banerjee to arrange this webinar even amidst this pandemic situation. And I must thank some volunteers who were working hard for the past few days to make this webinar a grand success. I congratulate all the participants for their active participation. Thank you everyone once again for making it a great success. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being there always.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your cooperation always. Thank you, sir.
Sir, mute হয়ে রয়েছে.
Thank you very much. So I feel really proud, elated for getting this proud privilege of meeting you all on this online platform, seeing such bright minds and persons at work together to make our academic interest and education more realizable. I thank Professor Mahua Bhattacharjee Madam for giving me this opportunity. I thank Professor Shagota Pandit, Madam, to give this opportunity, Professor Ishita Banerjee, Madam, to give me this privilege to speak with your students. So I have this feeling that the students are well learned, quite well trained, very disciplined, and they could at least bear the monotonous lecture for such a long time. And with their insightful comments, commentaries, as well as observations, I feel myself much privileged. And I have learned more than I could simply convey through this experience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So with your permission, I am ending the meeting here. Madam, with your permission also.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Shagota. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again, sir.
Okay, sir, I'm ending the meeting here.